Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Patch Rundown podcast that we are going to continue to try out and deliver to y'all. I am Patrick Scarborough, a.k.a. Scotty Zald, your host, and I am joined here by my co-star, co-guest, I don't know how you say it, Aiden Zyrene Moon. That's a joke. Aiden's not here. This is actually, we're all very sad. We have an empty chair here for Aiden. So if you're listening to this, Aiden, we miss you. I have my other soon-to-be maybe co-guest. He's been on here a couple times. Wesley Ruddle, the young Smash Gizmo. What's up, Wes?
Not a whole lot, Patrick. How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. And I think actually, I have a lot of space. I'm gonna stretch out over here.
Yeah, do
That's
that
what I'm
up.
gonna do. I'm gonna lounge. And then we have a special guest and new member of the live gameplay team, August Browning, Gypsy Lord, Riot Gypsy. I don't know what you do. August, what's up, man?
Hey, yeah, excited to be here. Whoa.
Oh my God. All right.
Wow, that sounded so genuine.
Yeah, I'm gonna move on from whatever
Wow.
that was.
It's palpable, the excitement. I just
want to talk about the changes so much. So we're here with a second installment of the patch rundown on 6.11. So we're now 2 patches after the drop of midseason, right? So I think we're still dealing with some of the fallout of that. So
Yeah, for sure.
So we're gonna go through and we are going to, we've kind of pre-grouped the sections. Everyone out there, it's going to be annotated depending on where you're listening to this to on the SoundCloud, on iTunes, or whatever. So you'll be able to navigate and click through, or potentially in the comments below. So Wes, why don't you start us off and try to talk to me about the theming of this patch, because I am noticing a lot of champions here that I have seen in pro play quite a lot.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess one of the big stories this patch is reacting to MSI and checking out the pro scene. What's happened since the mid-season? We made a whole bunch of changes. What's changed? What hasn't changed? And trying to adjust for that so that when we get back to global professional play, we hopefully are seeing some new things and players have some new exciting pro stuff to watch.
Yeah, I want to say LPL. And the LCK have begun. They've started a little bit of their season on 6.10, and I tuned in and I couldn't tell because I looked and it was it's Echo, Kindred, Rise, Azir. It was all the same guys. It was as it turns out, a wacky new season doesn't really put a dent in these guys. So
They did pick Veigar, though.
Oh, they did? Veigar?
There was a Veigar
We
pick.
saw Veigar. I think
And Victor's back. Haven't seen him in 2 days.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Lots of hot takes by August Browning right here. So let's kick it off. I mean, we have this whole section of these are kind of our pro informed guys, but let's start with everyone's favorite Emperor of Shurima, Azir.
I'm not sure he's my favorite emperor. There's so many to choose from.
I really like Nasus, honestly. He was a pretty cool emperor.
He's a cool
Azir
guy.
the
He's a
4th,
dog.
Azir the 6th. There's probably a long line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Azir. Time to look at Azir. It's that time. He has crept back into pro play as a super dominant pick. So yeah, this guy, love working on this guy. He's a dear friend to the live gameplay team.
Let's break it down a little bit. But before we get into the changes itself, guys, tell me, because I think people can hear it a little bit in your voices.
Yeah, for
but
sure.
Azir is he has been a challenge.
Yes, for sure.
And so break down to me exactly what has made Azir so challenging, because he is also, he's really popular. People like the guy. He's a cool character.
Yeah, for
right? Sure. You can also do a lot of flashy things, but in game, he has been a bit of a headache. So explain to me, break that down, why that is.
So a big problem with Azir is, honestly, we get to looking at champion strengths and weaknesses, right? And kind of a core design tenet is that a champion should have meaningful strengths and meaningful weaknesses, and they probably should make sense together. So one of the problems we run into Azir is he actually has a lot of things to accommodate for any weaknesses he might have on his kit. So he kind of covers up all his holes, and it makes his strengths uniquely oppressive. So for example, he's got these soldiers, right? They stab you, you die. Great, that's cool. And they happen at really, really, really long range. So that might be okay, but then if you ever try to get to him and close that range, he'll dash away and then Shurima shuffle you away, or into his team if you screwed up and then you die.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of got this kit that basically says, I'm this long-range poke mage, but P.S., I also have all these things to make it so that you can never actually access me, compared to, say, a Xerath, where Xerath can stun one guy if they get to him when he's poking.
Yeah, but if they're all like rampaging towards him, right, he's probably going to get caught up.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the parallels we frequently draw back to is like old Tristana when she was really oppressive and powerful. It's like when you have a character putting out sustained damage from a really long range, it's hard to give them both a very powerful AoE self-peel and a long-range dash. Once you have all three of those things together, it's like the character somewhat just solves the game for themselves after a certain point where it's like, well, they have a tool for everything, so I guess they win now.
Put a good player on them, funnel them the most gold,
Yep.
and then you're probably good from that point, right? So and this is something that I hear a lot, right? When I mean, even if you look at kind of like player sentiment around Azir right now, is you have a lot of people who are like, oh, he's really cool and I like him, but oh my God, he's been around forever and he's a problem, because it feels like he does everything. And yet some of the main frustration points, right? Like the fact that he can do his little banana dash and wall, or the fact that he has such insane range, aren't really in the patch notes. Right, so walk me through what these are really meant to do, because we have W. You can no longer tower bomb. You can't just use your soldier to kind of suicide in the tower for you, and the wall duration is down dramatically. It used to scale up to 7 seconds. Now it's just 3 at all ranks. So definitely impactful changes, but not ones that I would have expected.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess like there are two pieces to the Azir changes. I would say that one part is just mechanics trimming, just sort of taking away things that we don't think are like meaningfully impacting the things that Azir is doing in the game. So like the wall haste and the W tower explosion thing, these are both kind of like dangly mechanics that have been on the character for a long time, and they're adding some power in like hard to appreciate ways, but they're not really the things that people associate with like why Azir is really powerful. So those were just sort of things where it's like, hey man, there is so much going on with this guy. He is so complicated. Is there anything that we could trim away that will, hit his power a little bit, but just like start to clean him up and make it like a more understandable character? And then the wall duration, I mean, wall duration was ultimately a change I think we felt like we had to make, given how powerful it is in the moment when you cast it, right? I think when we first started thinking up Azir and the idea of a soldier wall, it was like the wall was supposed to be the core piece of the ability. And then
it was like it protected him, and then he can command soldiers from behind it, right?
Correct. Right. Yes.
Yeah, but as people got really good at the character, and as we've seen what people do with it now, that initial cast of displacing enemies is just so powerful that having that much extra power tied into the lingering wall, it felt like one of those two things had to give, and we thought like people were more attached to the Shrima Shuffle play, the huge displacement, than they were to a super long duration wall.
Okay. So where do we see Azir kind of going after these changes, right? I mean, it's tough because things like this can actually dramatically change a character's performance, even if they don't change how you perceive the character performs, right? You're like, well, he still pokes me, but, maybe their win rate goes down like a substantial amount, right? Like, how do we see Azir post 611?
So he's probably going to be weaker, and he's probably going to do less of all the things, which is, in a competitive sense, probably a good thing, because, it's like, okay, well, if you want to take someone who's good at taking down towers, maybe you don't pick Azir now, because Azir doesn't nuke them as hard as everybody else.
Right.
Yeah.
So that part's good. The real talk, though, is the guy still has this really weird thing where he has this insane long range, like kind of hyper carry potential. But on top of that, he has tons of self-peels, tons of avoidance. And then on top of that, he also has the Shrima Shuffle, which is really interesting in that it also creates a character who adds a ton of threat to you at that long range, not just from him hurting you, but from him actually running you into his team and getting you killed that way. And so at the end of the day, we're probably going to have to look at this character and look at something's probably going to need to give in terms of his mobility and peel or his range in the future to really get him into a good spot. Because I think at the end of the day, he still is going to exhibit I'm this long-range hyper carry who can peel anyone, and at the same time create massive amounts of long-range threat, even if it's not from myself because of Shrima Shuffle.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think that this is like case closed on Azir, for instance. I'm sure we'll have to look at him again, but hopefully this is enough for the time being.
Yeah. All right, cool. So moving on then, speaking of the time being, Echo. It's Echo. That's,
yeah, Echo.
that's
Great. Good joke.
People couldn't tell that's where we're going.
10
Yeah,
out of 10.
so we're talking about Echo, and Echo, this, man, I mean, we got a lot of Echo feelings in this room, right? We have Echo's designer, we have the best and most handsome Echo player, and then we have Wes.
Who got stuck with
The
it?
Echo hater.
Yeah, who kind of worked on these changes. So,
Yeah.
so a lot of takes is kind of what I expect. But the one thing I want to call out is I think people have been almost a little fed up with not just Echo being tanky and killing them and killing their face, but I think almost with our approach to Echo.
Yeah.
Right, has been in the past. It's been like, oh man, what am I going to do? Well, I look and I see Riot's patch notes, and it's just they're buffing AP and then they're nerfing tank, and I'm like, but I think all Echo is overpowered, right? Like you're not doing the thing that I think is important, and so these changes actually seem pretty bold in contrast to stuff that I think we've done before.
Yeah, I think with this patch, he's just been going so strong for so long now that it felt like at this point we really wanted to make sure that we were making a meaningful dent in the character and start to take him out of just the area he's in right now, which feels like he's a must pick, must ban.
Yeah.
Not just in pro play, but in solo queue too. He feels really dominant. So I mean, to a certain extent, we're staying the course on, bases go down, ratios go up. We're trying to still keep the nerf more focused on tank Echo than on AP Echo, because just in terms of how they're performing, that's the one that's going the craziest is the tank Echo. But there are some just overall nerfs to the character in here as well.
Yeah, I mean, August, how do you feel about the severity of these changes? It's kind of the first question. I have a follow up eventually, but how do you feel?
So as Echo's designer, I'm a little scared of them because they are quite big. But I do think that Wes is going in the right direction for making this guy a much healthier character. And so I think they're good overall. And if they are too big, we can always follow up in future patches and bump them back up if we need to, right? So I'm not worried about that. Basically, overall, the reason that we are really trying to hit this tank Echo build is because Echo, real talk, is kind of a scumbag. He runs around a lot, CCs you a lot, slows you a lot, and he's basically almost impossible to kill if he's playing his game, right? Because he has his ultimate, which says, sorry, I get to rewind all the damage. He's got a big shield. He's got a lot of dashes.
Yeah, really easy to kite opponents as well, right, with the multiple proccing of the passive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so the reason that we keep saying adding ratios to AP Echo is that we think actually AP Echo actually creates a lot more of a reasonable game, where it's like he is very evasive, he's very hard to kill, but if you manage to stun him, if you manage to catch him in a bad spot, you can typically burst him out or hit him so much that he can't really re-engage with a fight afterwards. Whereas Tank Echo doesn't have that specific weakness to make up for the fact that he's so crazy, mobile and so safe.
Yeah, I think the thing is, when Echo came out, we were calling him like a skirmishing assassin, which I think around these days we kind of have the name Slayer is like something that we're using. Yeah, it's Slayer, light fighter, whatever, skirmisher, whatever we want to call it, right? But he's not a pure assassin. Right, he doesn't actually have the incredible target selection of like a Deathmark or LeBlanc's QR combo or something that just says if I'm in range I can delete someone. But he is very tricky, right? And I think we've always classified him as this hit and run character. But what if you didn't have to run? What if you just kind of kept hitting, right? And it seems like that's a lot of where Echo is at now. And so the follow up question I have for you is because for people out there who don't know, there's actually been a lot of heated discussion in probably the last 2 to 3 weeks about is Echo just a tank? Is this kit just a tank kit, right? Is that something that we should embrace or not?
I mean, I think August raises a lot of good points about why we can't let this be a tank kit, right? As it was on live 2 patches ago, it was probably definitely a tank kit, right, at the end of the day, right? But there's a lot that you can do with tuning bases and ratios, and just for instance on this one, the cooldown on the same target for his passive makes a big difference about whether you want to hit and run and then re-engage in 5 seconds, or if you want to just, with 3 seconds, I might as well just stay in the fight, right? Those sorts of changes can hopefully get us there, because this character is not sustainable as a tank, because his weakness of he's super evasive, but if you ever get him, cool, you really get him, that doesn't exist when he's a tank. So
Yeah. I think my initial reaction to these, because I know you went through a lot of iterations,
Yep.
right? And I wasn't exactly sure where we were going to land. And I haven't been able to play this guy in forever because everyone just bans him or they pick him away. And at first I was really worried about this stun duration.
Yep.
I was like, wow, that's huge. And, and I'm immediately biased to think about all the times I ever made a sick play because of this stun, right? And then I kind of realized, at this point in the game, I'm in the minority in terms of how I'm building and how I'm playing this character. And 2.25 seconds is a long time when someone is stacking CDR and stacking defenses and just even threatening that amount, right? Because on AP Gecko, it's like you're doing it like once, maybe twice, because even if you're still around, it's hard to re-engage, hard to do things like that. And then I kind of thought to myself, when I like to get in there and do damage, it's the fact that they're stunned and that I'm going to do the damage really quickly to them that matters. And so 1.75 versus 2.25 doesn't actually matter all that much to me.
yeah,
Not to an AP Echo, yeah.
Yeah, right. It's
It's
like I'm
much
not
more
actually
important
using
to
it
a
all that
tank
much.
echo.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's another actually interesting thing about the stun duration that a lot of people don't consider, and that is the shield he gets from his W only lasts 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So when the stun is longer than the shield, he doesn't actually get the shield against the person he's stunned. Because they're stunned, they can't do any damage to him during that time. And with this change, actually, there's a quarter second where that person could potentially use a spell or waste a spell against him after the stun goes down. So he might be able to actually get more use out of that shield.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, the AP ratio in that shield is actually pretty significant.
it's insane.
1.5.
It's 1.5.
It's
Yeah.
huge.
crazy.
All right. Yeah. Well, I mean,
AP.
that basically sells me, right? I mean, I'm excited to continue playing the character. It hurts, but I think this is like I'm happy to see a commitment to saying, okay, we don't want to just do the same thing again.
Yeah.
And one last thing I want to touch on is going back to a point that you talked about earlier, which is this just a tank kit? Did we just make a tank? Why are we even trying to make him AP?
Yeah.
I would say one thing about Echo that makes him a bit less of a tank is I feel like some of our best tanks are ones who, not necessarily best, but the ones that are the most core tanks bring a lot of reliable sort of crowd control that's very strong, where it's you've got your Amumu ult, right? Where it's just boom, everybody's stunned for 2 seconds, you can't dodge it. I think one thing about Echo's CC profile is that while he does have a lot of it, it's all most of it is very unreliable. The W, the Q, you can dodge out of the Q to stop the slow. The W, you can dodge the W.
Yeah.
The biggest and most reliable point of his CC on his kit is actually that passive, especially when he's tanking and can just wail on you continuously, which guarantees you're permanently slowed. So in this sense, I think we're doing a really good job with the cooldown on the passive because that's going to hit his most reliable CC, which I think makes him most like a tank compared to the other CCs on his kit.
So last words. How do we think this actually impacts Tank Echo? Do you think this is going to make a pretty big dent?
I expect this to make a big dent. Fingers crossed that it's at least enough, but I mean, my honest read is that it's probably too much and that we'll probably have to look at him a couple months down the line. But given how prevalent he's been recently, I think we would rather err on that side than go a little bit too weak again and then have to look at him in another 2 weeks when he's still 100% pick ban.
All right. Well, talking about prevalent tanks, I think it makes sense to probably head over to Maokai. Because I think that's, I mean, you're talking about reliable in-fight CC. I mean, Twisted Advance, right?
Yep.
That's one of the strongest abilities in our game.
Yeah, for sure. Talking about Maokai, the change list for this patch is pretty tame and targeted. It's his
Health regen and health regen level down.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Health regen across the board down. It just sort of felt like this character gets massively inflated in fight sustained through his passive. So there's no reason for him to have. He had one of the higher health regens on a melee character in our game, and that just felt inappropriate. Most of the characters who have some sort of defensive ability like this, like Malphite passive or
usually have lower
passive,
health
they
regen.
usually have lower health regen. So that one felt like kind of a free win there. And then the other change is taking his Q cooldown from a flat 6 seconds at all ranks to 8 seconds at initial rank and then 6 seconds by max rank. So it scales down to where it was. The idea here is that we're trying to open up Maokai's laning phase to be more exploitable. It's already kind of exploitable. People who are really strong in lane, your Trundles and your Olafs can kind of beat him up sometimes, but that being said, he's still a little bit more resilient in lane than we'd like him to be, given how strong he is in team fights. We want to feel like sort of a tax you're paying for your team when you're like, okay, we're going to have this really strong team fight later on, but in lane, I'm not going to be nearly as powerful. So we really wanted to play that up.
Yeah. Well, then I guess the question that I kind of have, I don't, I feel like we don't really have to spend a whole ton of time on Maokai. I feel like people know how the character works, right? I do think it's a little funny that we were like, man, where'd Maokai go? And we gave him like the tiniest buff, and it's like, boom, here he is. There he is. He's back. It's like everyone who's watching MSI, right? It's the reason you saw Poppy and Echo every game was because Maokai was banned. They were like, we don't even want to mess with that guy. Yeah, we'll opt into this matchup every time. But the thing is that I've heard a lot around the design pit of people being like, talking about how we like Maokai and how Maokai is like a cool or like a good example of a tank in our game. And I kind of want to understand why that is, right? Because I think some people are like, oh man, getting rooted over and over again, not the best experience, right? But I think there's also something to be said for like, well, if tanks as a class are going to exist in our game, what are they even really going to do?
Sure. So, I mean, there are a number of things about Maokai that we like. One, he provides a lot of structure to team fights. He lives for a really long time. He kind of defines the middle space in a team fight by just scrapping with other
putting
tanks.
the ult on too, right? Yeah.
Yep. And so in a lot of ways he functions the way we want a tank to function. Also, like for instance, his dash is only to enemies, so he's not super slippery at the end of a fight. Like he's just in there fighting guys because that's what he does. Just repeated CC profile, the slow and knock up on the Q is just, again, it's like most of his output is coming from the utility and CC that he brings to a fight. And so he is a tank who does these things very well and lets his team play off of those. And it's when he's just like soloing a carry that we really don't like the guy. But when he is doing those other things that he does, it seems like he's like one of our most functional tanks, even at the top level, right? Like a lot of these guys who are like, oh, reliable initiation team fight guy, that's a Mumu and Malphite, right? And then it's like, well, but at the pro level, they just flash the Malphite ult, and they don't let a Mumu ever get near them, or they pick Janna or something, right? Yeah. Whereas Maokai like actually transitions to the
the definition of reliable kind of changes a little bit when every one of your pros is really, really good at the game. August, do you have any extra thoughts about this? I know we were just talking about how Echo is not a tank for X, Y, or Z reasons. Do you have any harsh feelings on Maokai either way?
I'd say overall, I think he is a good example of a tank. I just worry about generally just about his damage and like what he's bursting people. Yep. Like I feel like one of the reasons people are bringing him, Poppy, Echo in the top lane is not just because they're good tanky characters, it's because they also just murder everybody. Although at this point, I'm less convinced that it's individual kit problems as opposed to just being able to rush Sunfire Cape, Grasp the Undying, Iceborne Gauntlet, get tons of cooldown reductions so you can spam your spells, do tons of damage, and then, it's just like I question if that's supportable in the long run. Tanks, I feel like, are best if they're in there, they're fighting you, they're providing a threat, they're providing a lot of CC threat especially, but I question if they're the one full to zeroing you.
Yeah. All right. I'm in for that. So let's hop on over to your favorite champion.
Which August. One? I have so many favorites.
Yeah, you have so many favorite champions. I'm kidding. I'm being facetious. It's not August's favorite champion at all. Let's talk about Lucian.
Oh, boy. He is my favorite.
Yeah. So man, I mean, Wes gave us the breakdown of kind of Azir and where Azir's at. August, why don't you take point here and give me a snapshot of Lucian, how Lucian is, what Lucian is, why Lucian's a problem.
Okay, well, Lucian is honestly a very, very similar problem to Azir. It is basically, he is a character who brings a package of things you want in League of Legends from an AD carry, and is relatively good at all of them. And so he's this guy who provides a lot of really good strengths, but then if you look at like what's a weakness, you don't really see any. And currently, and that's what we're trying to emphasize with this patch. But basically, it's the thing of just, he is a generalist such that you would blind pick him into any situation. You can first pick Lucian into anything and not have a care in the world about what they would pick, be it on your team or on the enemy team. And that creates a situation where it's just like, what do you do against this guy? He doesn't really inform what a strategy the enemy team would take to beat him. And he also doesn't even inform what a strategy his team would take to really make him better, right? Or help him succeed. And so what we're doing in this patch is we're trying to say, okay, Lucian's very, very powerful. He's basically picked in pretty much every game at most levels of play, like pro all the way down to bronze.
Very popular champion.
And so to be clear, we're not nerfing him because he's popular. I mean, we are looking at him because he's popular in pro. Like in pro play, if they're popular, that means they're overpowered usually. But we're not like saying, oh, he's played a lot in solo queue, that's why we're going to nerf him. But we're looking at like, well, why is this guy so prevalent? Why is he so strong? Why is he picked so much in pro? And like one thing we identified is, well, there's nothing that he does that is weak. There's nothing that he has to think about or care about. And so what we're doing with this patch is we're saying originally when we made changes months and months over a year ago, we said, hey, what if we made Lucian a short range AD carry? And one of his biggest weaknesses was he's very short range with auto attacks.
500, which is like Quinn and Sivir.
Yeah.
And then OS
Quinn's
Graves
550.
now. Quinn's 550?
Yeah, Sivir's 500.
Yo, okay.
Or maybe Quinn's 525. I don't remember.
Quinn's 525. She's a little shorter than everybody else.
Yeah.
But anyways, Lucian is like, so we said, okay, we're going to give you
it.
500 attack range, which is a big deal, right? It means like you have to put yourself in basically most targeted spell range, like say a Maokai W, in order to like get your auto attacks off.
Rune
but then,
Prison as well, right? Things
exactly. Like just right next to Rise, and then he puts you in prison and you're dead.
Yeah.
Anyways, continuing on. Okay, so this is where we stop, right?
Yeah, this is where you just take a breath.
Take a breath. You good.
Yeah. So with Lucian, we were saying, oh, okay, he's a short range dude, right? But it turns out he's not that short range. Like he really isn't, especially when he's building cooldown reduction now. He basically, his Q extends a very, very long range. And so in lane, even if you manage to like force him out and like take a Caitlyn and be like, I'm going to poke you at really long range, maybe he can't auto attack her, but he's still actually pretty effective at getting those backline creeps with his Q, and pretty effective just poking Caitlyn and poking Braum with that Q through the minion wave. And so we're looking at the range there. Similar with Ardent Blaze, it doesn't do the most damage, but at that range, if someone's at 10 health and you shoot it out there, it's going to hit them. It could kill them. It's getting you kills at a longer range. And similarly, his ultimate nowadays, he's getting a lot of CDR, so it's actually going down on quite a low cooldown again, and his ultimate is actually quite a significant range as well. And so even though we say, hey, Lucian, he's a 500 range character, he's totally short range, in terms of the way he interacts with enemy champions, in terms of the way he interacts with minion waves and farms, he's actually not really being a short range character right now. And so these nerfs are targeted at that. We're saying, hey, maybe you do need to be a bit more short range. And if we play up that weakness, maybe he's not the guy you blind pick into every situation where you run into a Caitlyn and you're like, oh no, I have to deal with the fact that she's going to outrange me now.
Yeah, this kind of goes back to what August was saying previously about like meaningful strengths and weaknesses. It's like, okay, we're going to make him 500 range, right? Like that way he'll be short range. What does this mean for the character, right? And, you know, it means like taking more risk to get last hits in lane and to, you know, harass your opponent, those sorts of things. And he wasn't really exhibiting them because of his abilities extra reach here. So this is about like, okay, we tried to give him this weakness, but it wasn't really meaningful because of these other things. Let's dial those back and actually make it really sharp on that one point.
Yeah, I think the thing that always worries me when we touch Lucian, I used to be a Lucian player.
Yeah.
And then I retired
cool.
Yeah, before he was cool. Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, that's how I like to play the game. When everyone starts moving into my character, I kind of want to leave. I'm like, let me go find what people aren't doing right now. But
that's why you play Alawi.
That one's my ride or die for real though. She made her way up to the top. But yeah, I you know, it's tough because a lot of people really like Lucian. They really have a lot of fun playing Lucian. I think it's a fun experience. At the same time, I always have trouble being able to figure out, it's like, oh, is it fun because he's overpowered? Like, is that why you're having fun? You know, but some people feel like they have a lot more agency on Lucian than they have on other characters, which I mean, I think we can say is flatly true, right? Because he can just dash around forever. So, you know, I'm always worried every time we touch him is like, are we going to remove that? Because I think at the end of the day, like that Lucian is the reason that some people log into League of Legends. You know,
and
like
that
that's
is
an experience
fair,
some people
but like
love.
I guess the thing we have to consider is like, great, Lucian's super popular, super fun, but you also have to consider the people who have to play against Lucian. If a character is so dominant like Lucian is in the bot lane now, like you have to basically structure your entire picks of around like who he is, right? So it's just like, do you like playing AD carries who are like, you know, get stomped on in lane by Lucian? Well, too bad, you can't do that because he's going to be in every game, right?
Yeah.
And so it is okay if a character's popular. It's okay if a character's fun. We want to build that up, but we have to consider that if they're in that position, we need to make sure they have like ups and downs to them because they actually shape the entire landscape of the game around them.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important, like characters like Lee Sin, Lucian, Thresh, these characters who are very, very popular in tons of games. We want to make sure they're still fun. We don't want to stop them being played, but we do need to make sure that like they do have strengths and weaknesses such that players can play against them when they're seen so often.
All right. Well, we only got a couple more left here on our mini MSI rundown here. But I think for me, probably maybe the breakout of the tournament, and I'll explain what I mean in a bit, is Ryze. I think Ryze is a champion that was really, really powerful in Worlds, right? Faker is like, you couldn't let Faker have Ryze because he would just do really, really illegal things to your mid laner, and it was just really, really, it hurt to watch. And I felt like a lot of people weren't anticipating Ryze's return, but he came back in a big way. He was in a lot of the games, and and frankly was still doing a lot of really rude things to people. So how do we feel about Ryze? Because I know this one's actually a little bit of an interesting case. If you look down the line of what we're kind of doing.
Yeah, for sure. Ryze is a problem child right now. He's tough.
He's acting up in school.
Yeah,
he's not bringing home the grades.
It's rough. Yeah,
he's the rogue mage, Wes. He's gonna go rogue.
That's right. You're absolutely right, Patrick. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll preface this with saying that Ryze is definitely on our list for. He's got another update coming out this year. I think. There are a lot of game health problems.
Sooner than soon. I think at the time most people are listening to this.
Yeah, I don't know exactly when it's slated to go out, but it's like it's not a long ways off. Like I think it's supposed to be this year. And so he's one of these guys where we are just trying to buy time. If you want to play Ryze, we don't want you to be unable to play Ryze, but at the same time, we
would like it if you didn't.
Yeah, I would like it if you didn't. The whole chain rooting thing, how much damage he's just capable of putting out. He's just a fistful of problems. So we're doing some stuff to nudge him down. This is meant to be like, hey, top end Ryze, like if you're still good with the character, you're probably still good with the character, but not as good as you were previous patch. And let's wait until we've got an update that actually makes this guy something sustainable that we can support in the game.
Yeah. Ryze is an interesting one for me because I think it I'll blow this up and get a little meta real quick, and then which is I think a lot of people out there don't understand that we are, we're still learning a lot. As we make this game and as we're doing things, right? And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work out. I always look to Bard as an example of a type of character that we thought was just going to be so weird people wouldn't want to play him. And he's now one of our community's most beloved characters, right? You have kind of a different play style. He is very odd, but you kind of embrace that. And so I think Ryze is one of those definite things to learn from, right? Like I think we were, I remember the update. I was writing patch notes for it, and I was like, oh yeah, Ryze is like, we really want to take his like rapid fire machine gunny kind of spellcast thing, and we're going to try to embrace that. And I feel like this is almost us saying that doesn't work, or at least it doesn't work if you can root people, right? At least, I don't know, but I think it's us saying that Ryze was not the best execution of the guy that casts a lot of spells really fast, at least this version of the kit.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's hard to nail down what piece of it exactly was going wrong. I think that you can point to the chain root. You can point to the fact that he gets repeated shields off of the machine gun casts. I think that you can point to him having a skill shot as his primary damage ability, but also having chain root, right? Like there are like lots of like pieces that make it kind of hard to say like, what is core to Ryze? What can we actually support out of this? I think the big one that we've been like, oh man, we cannot support is chain rooting. Like I don't think you would see that on an update because he roots people for like 4 seconds right now basically, and it's just that's too long in our game is what I would say. But I think portions of the machine gun caster are like pretty vital to Ryze. It's just what other pieces can fit there and not make a miserable experience to play against.
I think the important thing to talk about with Ryze, compare him to say like AD carries, like because real talk, AD carries are machine guns, right? Some of them even have.
August is all about real talk today.
Yeah, real talk. Real talk
with August Browning.
Real talk o'clock.
But so a lot of AD carries are machine guns, right? Like some of them, like Jinx even has one, right? And so,
waiting for that.
And
one.
so it's definitely like we've seen because of AD carries that it is okay to have characters who have very, very high sustained DPS that you can't really dodge. And I think what's important is then, okay, so if you take the baseline of character has high sustained DPS that you can't dodge, what is the rest of the kit? And what does that mean for them? And so I think one of the problems running into Ryze is if you look at his kit's really all about just be within X amount of range and then kill that guy. Did you kill that guy? Good job, you did it. Did you not kill that guy? Well, then that guy killed you and you're kind of bad. He's kind of like, basically the way his kit works is it forces him to be very, very stat checky. And so his Q, while it can miss, like the situations where he's going to be winning or where it does not miss. And so, like, compare him to, say, a Tristana, whereas Tristana is going to be shooting you with her thing, but like if you jump on her
cannon,
cannon, yeah,
blaster, yeah, shooting you with her thing.
But if you jump on her, she has an escape that she can use to run away, or she might use it to get in on you. She has a knockback. She has her E, which she's trying to stack up over a few seconds, so then you can like try to flash away and stop it from hurting you. Basically, even though Tristana's main source of DPS is this targeted, sustained thing, she doesn't have to ask the question, let's stand next to each other and fight each other until one of us wins. She instead asks the question, I can maybe dodge some of your skill shots. You can maybe try to avoid some of the damage I'm doing on this E. Whereas Ryze is really just asking the question, let's stand next to each other, one of us going to win. And so because of that, we just create a stat-checky character that's very hard for us to maintain. He's either very, very overpowered or very, very underpowered with no really points in between.
I would like to point out that none of those were questions. August. None of those had question marks associated.
Was I going to ask a question? Did I say that?
You were like Ryze has to ask the question. Like I see. I reflexively I'm going to put question marks on it.
Oh, I see. Ryze has to ask the question.
No, you're fine. We're moving on. I'm trolling you. We'll probably edit that out. But there we go. I was just sort of like,
I kind of hope we don't at this point.
Yeah, at this point, yeah.
Man,
well, maybe we don't.
Claire's going to call me for a fool.
I'll edit out the fact that I said we're going to edit it out. There we go. Clean. So 2 more left. Kind of wanted to save them till last. They are the junglers, ranged junglers of the patch.
Oh boy.
Big
Ranged
size.
junglers.
Big size. First off, we'll just give me a little bit of sauce before we jump into them. Tell me about
Is sauce
why.
like salt?
No, what?
What if it's
just
salty sauce?
I am moving on from you.
Moving on.
I want to know why. We had a time where we were like, oh, range junglers would be really cool, right? Because we don't have them, right? And then we got them, and I don't know that we've been super happy with them.
Yeah.
So set that up, and then let's get into the specifics.
So I think one of the problems that we're running into with ranged junglers is the way we've implemented leashing rules to allow them to jungle is that they can basically kite the camps, right? Which means that ranged junglers typically don't take a lot of damage from camps for most of the early game because they're kiting them pretty effectively, which it could be fine, but like one of the problems you run into then is like, let's say you're a melee like Lee Sin or a Vi, right? Like when you go do a jungle camp, you're going to take a lot of damage from it. You're going to get hurt. And so you're going to be jungling, say, around at 50% HP versus that Kindred who's tumbling around dodging all the damage from the camp. Kindred's going to be jungling around at 100% HP. And in fact, Kindred's likely going to heal off of any camps that she goes to if like she's low HP and she goes and finds a camp. Whereas if like you go and gank top lane as Lee Sin and then you go to a camp, you're probably going to like take more damage from it as opposed to.
You might have to recall right in between doing these kinds of things.
And so it creates these situations where a melee jungler fighting against a ranged jungler, the melee jungler is basically running around at say 50%, whereas the ranged jungler is running around at say 80 or 90, and that makes for a very unfair fight should one happen.
Right.
There's that. There are other things too where it's like I think part of what we thought would be really cool about having ranged junglers is how does that impact the rest of your team comp and how does that impact the way you play team fights and stuff. And I think ultimately what we've seen with ranged junglers is that you use more ranged basic attacks to take towers more quickly, you apply red buff from a longer distance, and you try to steamroll the game by 20 minutes. And so I think that a lot of what we thought would be strategically interesting about getting ranged characters in the jungle ended up not really panning out, and it ended up just kind of being an arms race of like who's most powerful at level 3 or 4, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of like the bigger bummers for us on that is like we thought it would be really cool and that maybe we'd see like Mordekaiser bot and a ranged jungler in the jungle and like that would be cool, but at the end of the day it's like, well, no, you just always pick Nidalee because she kills them at level 3.
Yeah,
so.
Right. It's almost got like a new age of stat checks where I think it used to be the Lee Sin, Evelynn, Elise, right?
Yeah.
It was like, now it's Graves, Kindred, Nidalee. So
So one thing I just want to really quickly touch on before we keep going, though, is that it's probably okay if ranged junglers aren't taking a lot of damage from the jungle. Like we set that up so that they could jungle in the first place. Probably the scary part is that if they aren't taking damage, we need to see, well, what do they give up for the fact that they're going to be jungling at a lot higher health than the melees?
Right. So speaking of that, we're going to move into it. Kindred. Kindred is the character. We have some pretty big changes to Kindred, I would say.
Yep.
This feels very similar to me in the Echo realm of like, it's like, all right, it's time to actually do something about Kindred.
Yep.
And Kindred personally puzzles me a lot because there was a long period of time where like the experience win rate on Kindred players was like bananas, and then we kept hitting them. And they would go down a little bit, but then they always seemed to move back up. Again, like it wasn't like, oh, we're just taking them down 2, 3, 4% at a time, right? It was like they regenerate. It's like something about the speaks to the strength of the character. They're very resilient.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was a long learning curve with strategically what it meant to have a Kindred on your team, and like how does that impact how you play the early game. And yeah, Kindred players have kind of just kept figuring it out better and better and gotten better and better at rolling games over, I would say.
I would say, like, wasn't it like on release people didn't even want Kindred on their team?
No, they were freaking out about it, which is just like usually
right.
how
It
goes
was
with
like
your
the
champion.
most broken part of Kindred was like that point. Everyone's like, get away from my team. I don't know what to do with you. You're weird. Yeah, I remember there was a lot of like weird sentiment around that when they came out. So a little bit more than some of our others. Instead of talking about like the overview of like what is wrong or right with the character, tell me about these changes and their impact, because these are actually quite big. They are the cooldown on marking the champion goes down, so you can mark more champions more often, right? But now there is this new system by which Wolf marks jungle monsters to kind of like and is this a buff? Is this a nerf? Help.
Okay, all right. So these are meant to be overall a nerf to the character. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Kindred is overpowered at the moment.
Numbers are going down.
Yep.
Here.
The kind of like overarching narrative to Kindred is we are sort of disappointed with how little Kindred actually cares about the marking gameplay for Lamb and Wolf. And we've looked at a lot of stats on like how many marks do you get per game and that sort of thing. And it's like, well, it's less about how many marks you've gotten and how far ahead you've gotten your team in the first 3 levels, that sort of thing. And so we really wanted to play up like Kindred's power is tied to how well she plays the mark game, you know.
Yeah, and collects the bounties.
Right. And so part of that is like there are 2 parts of this change list: the cooldown going down on marking champions and the updating of the jungle tier list for how Wolf marks that are meant to, like, basically we looked at it from 2 ways, right? It's like, 1, Kindreds aren't really like getting into this gameplay, and 2, we haven't made it easy enough for them to kind of engage with this system. So we are making it easier for them to engage with it. If you want to remark a champion, it's not as long. It's 15 seconds quicker to mark a new champion. And Wolf will be a little bit more forgiving with marking targets, especially in the early game. So
it looks like Rift Scuttlers and Razorbeaks are your 0 to 2, right? So kind of the easier ones for you to get at. And then it kind of builds an expectation of like, well, the more marks you get, you kind of know which jungle camps generally are going to be those ones that spawn, and you can try to set up for them.
Right. And the idea is like, you can, it doesn't take, like, it's not so early in the game that it starts spawning on only like Dragon or Baron, right?
Yeah.
Like, it stays on the more attainable marks for longer. So the gameplay is more accessible to getting marks, but Kindred in return is losing a lot of damage on the basic ability of her Q. But she gets more as she gets more marks. So it's just tying more of the character's damage into getting the marks rather than just getting gold and buying items.
Sounds pretty straightforward to me. August, got any thoughts before we move on to another one of your favorites?
Yeah, so
the last one.
The reason that I like this change list is that I think what we're trying to do, again, it is a nerf, but we're kind of saying, okay, well, you're really, really strong at dueling early, so we're going to take your dueling down. But if we just did that, what would happen is just like, well, crap, now I'm bad at dueling, and marks are asking me to go duel. Well, now I'm just bad, right? I can't get anything. And so what these changes are trying to say is that we're trying to say, in a world where Kindred is worse at dueling, can we make it so that you can still obtain marks? Like, can we make it so that your character doesn't have to be the best duelist out there to be able to get marks? And that's what these changes are trying to do, is like ease up that burden of getting marks, so that like she isn't required to just be good at dueling you, but can actually say, oh, well, I can take an opportunistic Rift Scuttler, even if the enemy jungler cleared the first one, because it's going to spawn there. And so giving her more access to those marks is a good thing, I think.
Yeah.
It requires her to snowball less.
All right, last one on our MSI hit list, Nidalee, right? Queen of the jungle.
Oh man,
one of the strongest junglers I think we've had historically. It feels like when I think about the dominance of how long certain characters have been up there, Nidalee certainly a contender.
Yeah,
right.
Definitely up there.
Really, really powerful. So I'm going to ask two questions, and you guys can split up however you like. I want to know, why is that? Why is she so resilient to changes, and what are these changes doing at a high level? Go.
So one of the reasons she's just been resilient to changes is that she just clears so fast and so well that I believe this is true, right? Like Nidalee is just one of the top clearing junglers in the game,
of all time, honestly.
And so even if your character, say, maybe is weaker at dueling or whatever, right? Like she's just clearing so fast that she's going to have a huge level advantage, a big level advantage over you, so that when she does show up, even if you guys were in an even state, she might be weaker. It's not true because she has an advantage. We've seen this a lot with Shyvana in the past, where at some iterations of Shyvana just clears so fast in the jungle that like it doesn't matter that Shyvana has like, might not be the best character out there. She's just 3 levels ahead of you, and then she just murders you because of it.
Yeah, that I think was an interesting thing when I was analyzing this and talking with people about it. It was like, yeah, I guess it doesn't actually matter like 1-to-1 comparison, like how strong I am at level 3 and how strong Nidalee is at level 3, or how strong we are at these breakpoints, because she's getting more gold and she's getting more experience than you on average. You're never really fighting this character on on equal footing. You know what I mean? You're kind of always
footing's probably evil,
right? Yeah, stop leaking our new character abilities. Evil footing. But yeah, right. It's like you're just always fighting Nidalee at a time when she's advantaged, and that's even if you don't step on a trap or even if you don't get hit by a spear.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's one other thing that's kind of oppressive about her, and that is Nidalee doesn't have downtime. And what I mean by that is, especially like a lot of characters have ultimates, right? They get their ult at level 6, and it's a powerful spell that makes them powerful in a fight.
Tell me more.
Yes, and then it goes on a cooldown, typically a long cooldown.
What level do you acquire them?
At level 6,
Ooh.
the 6th level.
Okay.
Keep going.
And
technically the 5th level, because you start at level 1.
But the thing about Nidalee is that she does not acquire her ultimates at level 6, although her Cougar form does get more powerful at level 6.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it's not like her ultimate has any sort of cooldown. In fact, its cooldown resets to 0 when she hits a spear.
Yeah.
And
so she's just kind of, you're saying she just blazes through the jungle, swaps to a Manaless form, murders it, goes to the next one, does it again.
And
right.
and then basically is always at top effectiveness, right?
Yeah.
Like compare Nidalee to say an Amumu, who's, by the way, Amumu is a very, very strong jungler, in solo queue at least, not a high level play. Amumu will run around, do some strong jungle stuff, gank you, use his ultimate, murder you, you're dead now. But now his ultimate's on cooldown, right? So
and he's usually out of mana, if we're being real.
Yeah.
He kind of runs out.
And yeah, exactly. So then he goes back to base, fills up his mana bar, but then if he comes to your lane again, he doesn't have his ultimate this time. So his gank is going to be weaker. It's not going to be as strong. Whereas Nidalee, if she comes back to your lane, she's going to be equally as powerful, in fact, more powerful because she killed you and got gold, as she was the first time.
Or you're lower and she does the execute damage and stuff like that, right? So, yeah. So, I mean, this kind of goes back to what you guys were saying about range junglers, period, right? It's like, well, you don't really have to go back as much. And when the character's already packing a heal and the clear speed, it kind of like takes that and amps it up to like 1 billion.
Yeah. And also she is a form swapper starting at level 1, which means every time she gets a new ability, she gets 2 new abilities, which means her level 3 is just crazy by the nature of being a natural form swapper. So,
but one of them's a trap, Wes.
Yep, sure is.
It's a trap.
Yeah.
To step on it.
So then tell me what this is. Tell me what 611 is trying to do to Nidalee.
All right. Well, there are 2 pieces of this. One of them is Prowl, the movement speed that Nidalee gets when moving towards visible enemy champions. It was currently at a range of 5,500 units, which is Twisted Fate's ultimates range.
It's Pantheon ult too, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you can see an enemy champion on the map, You get movement
You
speed.
basically got movement speed twice, then, which was just pretty excessive.
I think that one's self-explanatory. I think most people
Yeah.
can get why it's not okay to just run at a million speed just because you see them on
This
your map.
mechanic was originally put on the character when she was designed to be a mid laner, and it was supposed to help her roam from one lane to another. At that point, it sort of made sense. It's probably still not the right idea to be 5,500 range, but that's why it was on there.
Yeah.
And ever since we transitioned her to a jungler, it really doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah. This is trying to help that downtime thing we were talking about earlier, where it's like, okay, well, she doesn't have an ultimate. She's hopping around in the jungle all the place. Maybe it takes her longer to get to a lane, though. So at least if you see a Nidalee top, it means she's going to take her much longer to get to you mid. So there's some downtime at least to be like, oh, I'm safe. I saw where she was.
Yep. The other piece here is the cooldown reset on Pounce.
Yeah, this seems I don't actually play this character, so I don't know the like 800 mechanics that are on her kit, but this seems like a big one.
Yeah, this one is intended to be the big one. This is the cooldown reset on pouncing to a hunted target or when you kill something is down from 70% of the cooldown at all ranks to 40, 50, 60, 70% of the cooldown. So this it's a 5-second cooldown ability. On live, it resets down to 1.5 seconds. Now, until you get the second point in Cougar, you are only resetting to a 3-second cooldown rather than a 1.5. So this is pretty big on paper. I'll say when I first saw the change list, I was like, oh wow, that's really big. That's going to make a big difference in how fast she clears. And then was kind of shocked that we had some playtest team guys run Nidalee jungle with these changes, and she's still really fast. She's not quite as fast, but she's still pretty darn fast from this. But what it does mean is that if she hunts you and she pounces on you, you actually have a 3-second window to actually create some distance rather than the 1.5. So maybe instead of getting 3 dashes on you, she'll only get 2. So yeah, it's meant to both slow her clear and make her a little bit less sticky in the early game in the gank scenarios. I'm not sure exactly how much it's going to do, but
I mean, it sounds like in PvP it's pretty considerable.
yeah, I'll say it sounds really considerable, but I mean, again, we did something similar with Kindred last patch where we eased up on the cooldown of her dash within her W.
Yeah.
And it's twice as long at early levels, and you look at that on paper and you're like, whoa, that's huge. She's going to be so much weaker. And then she still feels really, really strong in those scenarios. So I don't know. I'm thinking that this might be another one of those cases where it's like on paper it looks twice as long a cooldown. Oh my gosh, how is Nidalee going to survive? And then it's like, oh yeah, she's still just fine, I think.
Turns out 3 seconds is a very short time in League of Legends.
Right. So look, that concludes kind of our reacting to MSI bit. We still have a decent amount of stuff to get through. So we're looking for quick takes here because not a lot of these are quite as big.
Sure.
I mean, you worked on some of them specifically. So we're just going to try to lightning round through them. So Anivia, cost on the ultimate down. Seems like maybe we went a little too far last patch.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. This one's exactly that.
Yeah. It's like
we did a set of quality of life changes to Anivia last patch. I think ultimately they went a little bit too far, and the one thing that's felt particularly out of line is just not running out of mana nearly as quickly as she used to.
kind of a defining part of the character.
Yeah, she's
running out
supposed
of
to be really mana hungry. It's supposed to be a big deal if you deny her from getting blue buff or delay her tier or her catalyst, those sorts of things.
And people on the SoundCloud are going to be like, I'm so excited to hear what they have to say about the Anivia changes and see that it lasted like 40 seconds. All right, moving on. Corki. This
He's
guy
struggling.
Yeah, I mean he was on top of the world for a little bit.
Yeah, he was on top of the world for a little bit. We did the passive change that nerfed his basic attack from doing 1.1 total AD
To just 100%,
to just 100%.
just the normal amount.
Yeah, and that definitely hurt him. The other piece of that, so he's been struggling a little bit with that. I mean, honestly, like he's been struggling pretty hard since that. On top of that, we're also doing Trinity Force changes this patch that may be, it's spoilers, by the way. We will talk about Trinity Force. Yeah, we'll
today.
talk about Trinity Force, but those changes, Corki seems to be one of the guys who might be a little bit sadder about the changes to Trinity Force. So the fact that he's already struggling and we're hitting like his core first item for him, though he's probably still happy with it as his first item. It's the 2 or 3 items that we suspect he'll be a little bit weaker. we just felt like, hey man, it's time to throw him a bone. So here's some extra ratio on your R.
And we'll probably be looking at him again in further patches. We
for
do
sure.
feel he's pretty weak right now.
All right. Well, heading back to Alawi, return to Alawi Island.
Oh man.
I mean, last time we were here, right, we talked about how the 4-second cooldown in Harsh Lesson, we weren't like, that's the change she needs, right? It was just like, hey, seemed like 6ix9ine was a really big reaction in the wrong way. I am excited and scared about these changes, as I am with every Alawi change, because I'm like, this is the patch they're going to learn that I'm crazy, and that this champion has been the sleeping god the whole time.
Oh, are we?
Well-
Are we going to learn that?
Yeah, well, that's what I think.
She still doesn't.
I don't know, I taught a Swain that last night.
Oh yeah, you did.
Taught him a harsh
and then he
And
was
then
Swain.
August Blitzcrank pulled him into our team and we died.
That was
And
great.
we lost the game.
We lost.
Yeah.
Great.
I blame
Spoilers.
Fiddlesticks.
Swain's crazy. But yeah,
sure.
I mean, this is. I don't know what else there is to really say about this one. I think it looks a lot bigger than it is. I think the QW are, we're trying to make her more of a juggernaut. Actually, feel like you can build those items, right? Because the vessel mechanic is you got to deal damage to it.
Yeah.
You got to build damage, but then that version of the character doesn't always like play in team fights, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely true. I think like one of the key things when we're talking about juggernauts is that they have a really hard time accessing the backline targets that they really want to just hit really hard, right? You have a hard time getting to marksman if you're a juggernaut. That's kind of the whole deal with the class. And one of the things we noticed on Alawi is that she doesn't really have anything that she feels good about hitting a tank with. And so that's kind of where these W changes are coming from, where it's like she is not going to hit Caitlyn, so she better feel good about hitting Mundo and Maokai. And on live, she just doesn't. So,
Yeah.
We're giving her something to help her actually function in the middle of team fights here.
Yeah, I mean, this seems like, as I understand the character and have played the character, you have to overkill people or you're not killing people.
Yeah.
Right, and this feels like it really takes it less from a binary state of, just, all or nothing.
Did I burst him?
Right, exactly. Hashtag build Trinity Force. Moving on to
It's gonna
Trinity
be great.
Force. Jaxamundo.
Jackson-
Talking about Jax.
Jaxamundo? Okay, God.
What do you got? Come on, tell me about
Okay,
Jax.
great.
Hot takes, quick takes.
Hot
what do you
takes, got it. So Jax, I worked on this one. This one's pretty straightforward. We actually think Trinity Force is going to help this guy out a bunch, so we didn't want to go overboard here. The one thing we are doing is we're making the passive stacks from Relentless Assault fall off one at a time rather than all at once. So on live, when Jax is out of combat for 2.5 seconds, he loses all of his stacks. Here, he starts losing them after 2.5 seconds, and then he'll lose one stack every 0.35 seconds from there. So it's like over the next 2.5 seconds, he'll lose all of them. The idea here was that Jax is a little bit too punished right now in terms of team fighting. Like if he gets hit by one peeling ability, he usually loses all of his momentum in the fight and is has to take a lot of time to ramp back up.
Especially because we gave him 8 stacks last time.
Right,
Yeah, instead of
exactly.
6.
So it's like a really big deal for him to lose all of those. So we wanted to make it so that okay, maybe you lose 3 or 4 stacks, but if you get back in there quickly enough, you can stay like a rampaging monster with a lamppost.
Yeah. Swain. August.
Swain.
Feelings. Swain.
The
Swanier.
Birdman. So
Bruce Swain.
simply put, the changes of the last patch to the ultimate, we're trying to say that, hey, Swain right now is only really getting very decent healing against squishy characters and really no one else, even though he's someone who kind of wants to live in the middle of a fight.
Yeah.
And so
Kind of a natural predator like Maokai or stuff is how we used to talk about him.
Exactly. And so we gave it just a flat healing that was basically calculated to be, here's the healing he gets from squishies. Now let's get that healing from everybody. But it turns out when he was getting the healing he got versus squishies from everybody, he basically started going crazy and being unkillable, especially in combination with Rod of Ages. And it's a healing for mana passive where you take damage, you get mana back, and then the mana you spend, you heal. So in a
he
fight when
takes a lot
everybody's
of
wailing on
damage.
Swain, takes a ton of damage, gets a ton of mana, converts that mana immediately into birds. And then
1-to-1 conversion, mana to birds.
How
those
many
birds put
birds,
it
sir?
down.
What have you got? Yeah. All right. Yeah, I feel like this is honestly just as cut and dry. It feels weird. We just spent so long talking about the nuances of all these problem children. Swain, we went too far on one end, and this is kind of, it's just the tank guy, right? It's like you're building we kind of expect it's like, okay, Roa, Rylai's are things this guy wants to
Yeah.
build. He's building like Rod of Ages into Frozen Heart Spirit Visage. And you're like, wait, where did all the AP go? We gave you this cool way to scale your stuff, and you're not really doing that.
Yeah, I mean that's the one thing I wanted to note on is that this is taking away from his bases rather than his ratios, because I mean basically we saw him doing the old Maokai build of Roa, Frozen Heart, Spirit Visage, and we're just like, oh, he's probably doing too much damage if he feels okay not
doing that,
building AP. So
Just getting the one and sitting on it. Yeah.
yeah, so this is supposed to drive him into like maybe Roa Zonias, right?
Yeah.
Roa Zonias Abyssal, something like that. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, utility AP items. Yeah, I think, and then hopefully you actually manage to kill him. Good luck, everyone out there. I know I tried, and Swain consumed us all.
Yeah, spoiler alert, Executioner's Calling is 800 gold. If you like AD and you're playing in top lane and you want to play against Swain, just buy an Executioner's Calling and sit
And it's
on it.
over for him.
It is actually
I
over
just took
for-
Ignite, and then it was over for him. And then,
yeah, dude, I just play Olaf and I spend 800 gold, and then I just hit him in the head with my axes until he dies.
God! All right.
Hard countered.
All right. Talia,
So Talia.
rock solid champion.
Yeah.
No, it's bad. Yeah, I mean, well, actually, Talia's a little weak.
Yeah, she's a little weak. We're going a little light on these changes. Our perception is that she is weak, but at the same time, we're seeing that when people are getting some experience on her, win rate's starting to go up a bit. So we want to make sure we don't overreact initially, and so we're doing some light, like, hey, your laning's a little hard, so here's easier time killing all the minions at once, and here's an easier time by not dying to burst because you have 20 more health.
Yeah, this one's. I think there's a little bit of an interesting discussion around this character because people are like, "What do I want to max Q? Do I want to max E? Right?
Yep.
E is your little quilt move. I don't know the names of the new ability yet.
It's Dodgy Ground, something ground?
No,
That's what we called it in development, was dodgy ground.
Dodgy
Shout outs to Dodgy Ground. Shout outs
really
to Daniel
loved
Klein's
Dodgy Ground.
tooltips. But yeah, so it's really consistent, right? It does 1,000,000 damage if you actually displace them or if they dash through it, right? But I think in either way, regardless of what school you're in, either Q or E, this 50% damage to minions, I think very interestingly, also helps you last hit if you have worked all the ground like around your tower and you're getting pushed in, right? You can use it as like an extra strong basic attack, right? And kind of get those properties from it.
Yeah,
Yep.
for sure.
Yeah. So Vel'Koz.
Oh man, VK. So the two things we're doing here is one, increasing the slow in the Q, kind of trying to encourage a Q max build. Q is like a cool spell, you can dodge it. He does trigonometry, Pythagoras, all up in here.
There.
So saying like, hey, if you do max
I dropped
Q,
out. I don't know what you're saying.
if you do max Q, you're gonna get more out of it. You're gonna get more out of that slow if you choose to max Q in lane. And then life form disintegration ray with the R, kind of just saying that like, feel maybe we might have gone a bit too far on like just completely removing the passive stacks. That was actually probably one of like the fun parts about the spell, right? Was like, hey, you stack up this passive and you see it stacking as it's on them. So this is kind of like giving Vel'Koz a bit more reliability and getting to that like ultimate dream of the true damage ultimate, where it's like, hey, if you focus your ult on a guy, you're not going to get the full true damage, but you will stack it up, and so the last half.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think this one, what I was hearing Kevin talk about it was Kevin Huang, the Beluga Whale.
The Beluga Whale.
The guy working on him was it was a lot like, I used to play a lot of Vel'Koz. It's like, what's the most fun part of Vel'Koz? Knocking up a group of people and then melting them to death with your laser. And then I feel like it's like, well, when you take away the passive stacks, right, you're actually saying, well, should I not opportunistically go for a Giga Laser when I see it, right? Because you kind of feel like there's a weird play. It's like, no, sorry, you got to stack up every person individually and then you do the thing, right? So I think this it's still going to be pretty good if you get them deconstructed and then you burn their face off, but, seems like a good halfway.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wes, tell me about Zed.
Zed, yeah.
The Shadow Ninja.
Kagetora,
Kagetora, indeed.
the Shadow Tiger.
Yeah, so we're taking down some of the damage on his Q here, but increasing the amount of damage he does for hitting multiple shurikens. So the idea here is that a Zed who only hits you with one Q is going to be doing less damage. A Zed who can hit you with two Qs should be doing about the same amount of damage. And then a Zed who can hit you with all three, like that guy's
It's
gonna
over.
yeah, you're done.
You're dead.
You're Dunyan rings, kid.
Yeah.
By the way, you're dead because he death marked you, so it didn't matter that he hit you with the 3 shurikens.
Oh my God, get
Oh my
yourself out of
gosh,
here.
he's just memeing it up. Yeah, so Zed might be an ongoing project here, but this was the sort of thing where it's like we wanted to take some damage away from his baseline, like how much he does just for free, and give him some damage if he if he manages to hit like multiple shurikens.
I'm still over Dunyan rings. I've
Yeah.
literally never heard that in my life. That's awesome.
What, have you not hung out with Sassy, dude? He says it all the
man.
time.
Oh my God, Dunyan rings. All right, so
You're done.
now we're done with champions. We got a couple more items coming at you now. We got Boots of Swiftness, Berserker's Greaves, and Ninja Tabby all together. Because yeah, I mean, boot balance has been in this really weird spot where we couldn't get people to buy Boots of Swiftness for like 5-6 years.
Except for
And-
Udyrs and
Yeah.
Garens.
Yeah, right. It was like you look at the usage rates. It's like there are other items. I don't know. And then you get to this point where this season we're like, let's give them like 10 more range and 200 less, or 10 more speed and like 200 less cost. And it's like, are there other boots? Buy your Swifties today.
So one of the important parts about Swiftness boots is that we really like to get them in a spot where they're just not a must pick on a lot of characters. One of the reasons being is that it is good to have an option to deal with slows in the game, but when every character is taking as a default, it's actually very hard to put slows on champions kits because they're all just really bad, right? Like we tune a lot of characters around like, hey, this is a slow zone that is tuned around the fact that like you can get out of it if you do these things given this % slow.
Right.
And so in a world where everybody's taking swiftness boots, like those slows suddenly have to be higher, and then if you don't take swiftness boots, like the slows just destroy you.
Yeah, they just
so
exploded. Yep.
and so it's a better world where swiftness boots are a purchase that is sometimes good but not always good.
A reactive buy when a lot of people have slows rather than just, I buy these every game.
Yeah.
Because they're good.
Yeah,
The best.
seem good. And then I'm just gonna assume Berserker's Greaves and Ninja Tabby just making them better.
Yep. We threw some love to Mercury Treads a few patches back. There were a couple other boots that just felt like, especially at the 800 combined cost from base boots, were a little lackluster for the price point. And so, yeah, a little bit of extra attack speed, a little bit of extra basic attack reduction on Ninja Tabby. So, yeah.
Shoutouts to Matthias for writing the sickest joke, by the way. The only thing Ninja Tabby have in common with an actual ninja is you can't see them anywhere.
Oh, ouch.
Oh,
Yo,
wow.
Matthias, my man.
That is savage.
Yeah, he gets it sometimes. He really gets them. But yeah, so last two things I want to get to. We're gonna take a bit of a detour. Wits End. Hey, remember that item?
Yeah.
It exists.
Yeah, I built it on Warwick. Do you remember Warwick?
I remember
It's cheaper,
Warwick.
guys. It's cheaper. It costs less.
It's not just cheaper; it also builds out of a Negatron. clone.
Negatron,
Dude,
yeah.
this is going to make Teemo so OP.
We're joking about this. I actually do think this is a very sizable buff.
Yeah, I
to
know.
the
Actually,
item.
yeah,
It's the build path got better and it got 300 gold cheaper.
yeah. That's actually super strong.
Wits End might be good this patch, guys. It might be.
You should
Yeah.
try
Don't
it.
hold me to that, but
Yeah.
I think it might be.
Yeah, that's kind of what I looked at. I was like, oh, all right. Well, I'm gonna die to a lot of people building Wits End this patch. Because I already died to like Kale and Kog'Maw anyways,
Yeah.
and then this is gonna happen, and I'm just gonna get exploded.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Last one. Last big thing. Trinity Force and Stinger. After what is this? 7 years?
I don't know, man. Long time.
It's like a long time.
We finally got the crit out of Trinity Force.
The Trinity Force is breaking up.
Yeah, dude.
Zeal's been playing with these other new marksman items,
Yeah.
doing his solo project. He's no longer in the Trinity Force. So this is huge. This is way bigger than I'm trying to make this sound right now. This is I didn't think we would ever do this, right? It was 35% more or 25%. I'm bad at math. 25% more attack speed and 10% more CDR. 20% CDR
That's
Trinity
scary.
Force.
Yeah.
That is
Whoa!
really scary.
What is going on? Help.
Okay. Well,
Help.
so
Please.
so the idea here was that Trinity Force, we saw a bunch of guys who used to be core Trinity Force users kind of shift into being core Ginsu's Rageblade users prior to the mid-season. Guys like Aurelia and Jax and stuff, they were just like, Trinity Force, what's that noise? I'm just going to buy this Rageblade thing. And we kind of balanced them around Rageblade, which as it turns out was just probably ridiculously overpowered the whole time.
Yeah.
And since we have made the Rageblade changes, they've made it like more of a multiplier item rather than a first item spike. Those guys are just kind of sad that they don't have a good item. So the fighter duelist guys who like really want to attack a lot and have like good reasons to, you know, just auto attack guys a lot rather than like fishing for a crit, didn't love this Trinity Force from this previous season with 15% attack speed. You know, it used to be as high as like 30, 35, I think, in previous seasons. And so it wasn't working as well for those guys. And almost all of the marksmen, other than Corky, had stopped buying Trinity Force. So we're just sort of like, well, I don't think the crit makes sense anymore. Let's like tailor it back for the guys who miss this item a lot now.
Yeah, you kind of got to cut your losses and say, we can't have these two classes share this item anymore.
Yeah.
Right, because one of them doesn't want it, and then one of them wants it, and it's not as good.
Yeah, and on top of that, Zeal was building into like 5 or 6 items that people all really wanted, and then Stinger was building into Nashor's Tooth, which
like
2 people want, 3.
Maybe 3.
Azir, Kale, and Teemo, right?
Yo, Diana.
Okay, it's like maybe 3.5.
Azir.
I already said Azir.
Yeah.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh,
Sweet.
I was zoning out.
My legendary Blood Razor Echo build.
Oh,
The
I've
Rekko?
seen that before.
The
It's
Rekko.
scummy.
So that's kind of the TLDR on it. It's pretty scary. It might end up breaking some things. We'll find out. Don't play Aurelia.
Oh, I'm about to play
Yeah,
Aurelia.
I know you are.
We forgot
Yeah.
to mention the most important change, though, which is the combined cost has been reduced to 333.
I think technically increased, right? It used to be 200 gold. It's just Stinger is cheaper than Zeal.
Okay,
Yeah.
I increased.
The overall item is
increased
a
Yeah,
little
the-
bit cheaper.
333.
Yeah, the overall item is, what is that? Like 50, 60 gold.
67 gold.
67
Patrick.
gold
Stay in
cheaper.
school, kids.
Yeah, there you go. Or you won't be able to look at these numbers and describe what they mean. So, okay, so yeah, and then Stinger itself is going down in costs and in attack speed, just because it was actually really crazy, but we just couldn't get anyone to buy it because it built in the
Because it
Nashor's
only
Tooth.
built into Nashor's Tooth,
So
yeah.
Azir nerf.
Yeah, technically the Stinger thing is a nerf for people who bought it. It was only a couple people. They were all doing really well already. So
Yeah, and Nashor's Tooth is still really good. So when you finish that item,
still really
Beast.
good. Yeah.
all right.
Get
Well, that's it. We did it. We did the whole thing. Do you guys have any closing thoughts? Any other things that you're kind of thinking about, looking forward to for 6/11? Anything you're excited to do? Anything you're excited to play? August is like, there's no Blitzcrank or a Janna changes in here, so I don't care.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited. Hopefully, with less Lucian in the bot lane, there'll be more immobile carries, which I can just hook with my Q
I
and
see.
kill.
This was your plan all along.
And then they'll immediately switch back to playing Lucian after I do that to
So you're
them.
part of the problem here, August.
Yes, I am. As a Blitzcrank player.
All right. Well, cool. Anything else?
Oh no, I was just gonna say I think I might dust off the old Xinjiao top lane, rush this Trinity Force, see what happens.
Ooh, yeah. I am actually legitimately excited about the Trinity Force.
Yeah.
Trinity Force
Jungle Vi
Alawi.
is gonna really enjoy that stuff too.
Ooh, what about top lane Vita?
Top lane Vido.
Ooh, okay. All right. Well, it sounds like we know where we're going here with all these Trinity Force changes.
Melee bruisers.
So, yeah, play a melee champ. There's gonna be it's like Quinn with Trinity Force is gonna kill
Oh,
everyone.
it's just murder all
it's
of
like
us.
we're talking about the good old days, and there's just someone who does it better that is probably ranged.
Trinity
Probably
Force
range,
Craves.
Yeah.
No.
Well, that
That wouldn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't sound
That wouldn't
like
work.
really
Doesn't
work.
have enough AD.
Doesn't sound that good. Triforce Vayne top lane.
Oh,
Let's go.
Ooh.
Didn't care about the crit anyways, dog. What's
Oh
up?
man, more attack speed?
That's more attack speed. There it is. All right.
No
well,
AP
that's,
anymore.
well, that's the one. Yeah, that's the one that you guys got to watch out for. Maybe top lane challenging Smite, Blood Razor, Trinity Force, Vayne. Easy. All right,
God.
cool. Well, well, that's it. We've all clearly lost our minds rattling off talking about the patch changes. But guys, thank you again for coming and hanging out with me, doing this thing here. Out in the middle of the week. You guys will be listening to it either on the day of the patch notes or maybe just a little bit before. So thank you for tuning in and listening to us. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe wherever you're listening to this to. iTunes, SoundCloud, something called Stitcher. I've never heard of it, but apparently it exists. People listen to things there. So enjoy that, and tweet angry things at August Browning. And
At
we'll
Riot
talk.
Gypsy.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it next time.
Yeah.
Probably, unless it's incredibly toxic.
Oh, we'll talk about it.
Yeah,
anyways.
we'll talk about it anyways. All right, cool. Thank you. Goodbye forever.
Thank you.
All right, we did it.
Crushed it.
Gave August the sick Twitter plug. Where's my Twitter plug? Jesus, I'm talking to my agent.
Like and follow.
I remember. It's like I always try to do something at the end, and I was like, "Fuck, I don't have anything," and I was like, "Oh, let's just invite harassment to August." That sounds fun.
You ruined Stona. Oh God.
All right, so I think in general, I'm happy. I think I want to edit out some of our MSI talk. I'm fine with that being super long because that's what the majority